We're really excited to talk to you more about making the most of community service. First, I'd like to introduce our esteemed panelists, starting with John Burns, First Deputy Commissioner, Supervising Administrative Law Judge of the Office of Administrative Trials and Hearings.
Good morning. Good morning.
Sure. Next, Raul Hernandez, Program Coordinator, Newark Community Solutions.
Good morning.
And last but certainly not least, James Broderick, and we have a new title. I'll let you add.
Director of Community Courts.
Director of Community Courts, Center for Court Innovation. Oftentimes when we think about community service, we think of cleanup, we think of free labor, we think of it as very punitive, but community service can be restorative, it can be meaningful, it can serve as opportunities to engage stakeholders in the community. And we have a great set of panelists here who are doing innovative and creative things with community service. And so what I'd like to do now is kind of have each panelist talk about some of the work that they're doing. So I'm going to turn it over to James first.
So good morning, and thank you so much for making it back. So I'm really excited. So how many people here offer community service as part of an option? Great. And so I'm assuming we use folks who have, what we would have defendants, but how many people also use community residents and volunteers? Okay, so a lot less. So one of the things that I want to talk about in this presentation is who is the who. So we have defendants, and we already know that, but how do we engage community? And then what is the projects that folks tend to do? Everything from graffiti removal to park cleanups, and I want people to really think about the why. Many times the project in itself is the means and the end. Somebody gives us a call and talks about a dirty street, and at the end of the day, the street is clean and we feel really good about it. But is there a way that we can make a further investment in places and spaces? And one of the things that we talked about a lot in this conference is the people, that we invest in people, but I also want to take a little time to talk about community service as a community healing project, and how can we deal with trauma in neighborhoods. And so there's a lot of opportunities. So I'm going to take you through a case study because I feel like each neighborhood probably can identify a project that sounds like this. So this is a park called Dr. Green Park in the middle of Brownsville, Brooklyn. And Brownsville, Brooklyn, who some of you I got a chance to talk to, is about a little over a square mile, 100,000 people living in 18 different housing developments, the highest concentration of public housing in the United States. And right in the center of Brownsville is this park called Dr. Green Park, and it happens to be between a couple of warring housing developments. And also, it's a spot where it has a high police presence. But at the same time, it's a park, so it's where young people convene. Unfortunately, it's lacked a lot of investment. So I want to give you a sense, an aerial view of the space. So looking down on the space, even if you weren't in the park, you can see a few things. One is there's the isolation of it. You see a lot of trees which look really nice, but what you don't see is that it has a lot of gates. It almost feels like what you would imagine when people are in prison and they're let out into the yard and they're able to run around. But the property itself, if you're looking at the baseball field or you're looking at the spots, you can see it's pretty run down. So a park is supposed to be a place where you can have an opportunity to be a kid and run around and feel good about it, but you can see the disinvestment. And so there's been a disinvestment by the people who use the park, but more importantly by government. And so what do we do, and how do we get people really engaged? So a few things that have happened. One is you probably heard the term CPTED a lot. Crime prevention through environmental design, and you heard about hot spots and placemaking. So for the criminal justice practitioners in the room, it's really important to use data. And this is unfortunately a crime map of the area right around the park. So you can see it's a heavy crime area right in the middle of the park. So it was a good justification of why we wanted to use a criminal justice, a public safety response to community service. And so what is the process? Now the process included a bunch of different things. One is this idea of how do you engage people in a long-term solution on taking back a park? Many times, again, we tend to do these one-shot deals that feel really good and then we walk away, but we wanted to take it on for an entire summer. And it was a combination of things. It was community folks who were were sent to us because they had a mandate, but then there were community residents who would come out on these, and we happened to do them every Thursday. So people knew we were going to be there, it was going to be very present, and we were going to take back this space. And taking back this space was the beginning to an end, where what would we do to activate it when it was all over, and how do we create a healing space? So the work. What's most exciting about the project, and I think we've all, in our work, I don't know how you feel, we don't have scoreboards and we don't have cash registers. It's hard to know if we're winning. But with community service, it's very tangible. At the end of the day, it was dirty, it's clean. It wasn't painted, now it's painted. So the work itself is something that was really powerful for the residents, and specifically, we tend to use young people. Young people between the ages of 16 and 24 who have been involved in the criminal justice system and have been seen by many of the residents as the cause to a lot of these problems and seeing them as the agents of change to come up with the solutions. So you see the physical transformation that's happened in that park. I mean, everything from the fun of painting it. So in Brownsville, the color is purple. So wherever we walk, the young people are in purple, the basketball court is purple. And it was really, really important and exciting for us to have it being very, very visible. And we didn't separate who is the defendant versus who is just a community volunteer. Everybody got the same purple shirt on those days. And obviously our community service crews were very mindful of how to keep it separate if we needed to, be mindful about safety, but at the same time understanding that they all are from this community, that they were going to heal it together, and whatever harm you caused it was about paying back, but it wasn't using community service in this point as shaming. Many times we've used community service. The whole idea around the vest back in the day was we wanted other people to say, oh, I don't want to do that. We wanted people to say, I do want to do that. I want to be part of this change. And so this is why we didn't use the vest for these projects. We actually everybody had the same shirts, and it was monitored very closely. So what was the end? The end was a lead up to a major arts festival, arts and healing festival that did a few things. One is it brought big time talent to Brownsville, and it also brought the talent that already existed to the stage. So we were able to raise monies through a lot of different foundations to actually put on a music and arts festival, but also we were able to create local entrepreneurs that were able to set up shop in the park on this particular day to talk about small businesses. So we also used this moment as an economic opportunity, take back a park, show the talent of Brownsville, while at the same time showing people and their business attributes come alive. And many of the young people actually planned the project from soup to nuts. So it wasn't only the cleaning and doing all that work in the beginning, but they were the ones who were identifying how the agenda would look. They reached out to the stage company. They did the sound. So it really was that. And so you do all of this work, you activate the park, you have stuff, and then, again, should we walk away? No, you never walk away, right? There's always a next step. And so the next step is thinking about how do you keep that park safe in the evening? And so you heard earlier about places and spaces and how to use architecture and design. So one of the things we've been thinking about a lot is lighting. How can you use lighting in a way that is not the police light, which I mentioned earlier, where in New York City they put these police lights and it shines bright on a space, but it doesn't make it feel safe. So we're having our young people work with design companies on talking about lighting in the park so people would feel comfortable using it in the evening. But at the same time, we also are working on healing benches. And we're working with companies around the Department of Mental Health to talk about how we can design that space that would change the dynamic. When you're talking about the tension of communities like Brownsville and the young people who are using this park are going through, we really wanted to change not only their feel of themselves, but of that physical space. So this is a case study on ways that you could think about community service as community healing and transforming not only places and spaces, but the people who are the agents of change.
Thank you, James. Raul, could you tell us a little bit about your work in Newark?
Absolutely. So I'm Raul Hernandez, and I'm the program coordinator, so I oversee the Alternative Sanctions Department. In the Alternative Sanctions Department, we're in charge of monitoring compliance and also scheduling community service and building relationships with community partners. So our mission at Newark Community Solutions is to increase community involvement in the criminal justice system and help defendants address the social issues driving low-level crimes by decreasing the court's use of fines and short-term jail sentences, increasing the court's use of social service and community service, and increasing offender compliance. So I just want to give you a brief overview of some of the effective tactics that we use over in Newark. And the first one is we try to find the right partners. So the first thing that we look at is jurisdiction. We got to see if, for starters, this place is in our community where our people live. The second thing is we want to establish a community organization. So we want to make sure that this organization is already established in the community, that they're already being effective, soup kitchens, churches, mosques, etc. The next thing we look at is infrastructure for supervising and reporting. Is this place capable of supervising our clients from court? Next, we look at appropriate tasks. We don't want people sitting down in service. We want people actively doing community service at these locations and being visible to our community. And then the next one is cultural competency and understanding of the population. So making sure that these locations that we send our clients understand what clients and what population of people are coming to their sites. The next thing that has been most effective for me is hiring from within the community. So as supervisors, we want to make sure that we're bringing in people from the community, people that are from that area, who know the area, who understand the people from that area. I also look for people who are passionate about the work, people who love their city, who love the people in their city, and who want to see a difference in their community. I also confirm that they have an understanding of our program's mission, that they know what it is that our goal is and what it is that we're trying to accomplish in our city. The last most important thing is cross-training and crisis training. So my team is trained in crisis intervention training, mental health training. We also work in gardens, which I'll talk about a little later. But every one of my site supervisors that work in the garden have gone to Rutgers University and have completed a Master Gardener's program. So they're knowledgeable of working in gardens, what these flowers mean, how to grow fruits, how to grow vegetation. Even a few days ago or yesterday, Judge Pratt was here with Mr. Randy Burley, and he runs a church, the New Hope Baptist Church. And our partnership, our clients work in a garden, right? They have fruits and vegetation, and we donate it to the church. And so the church then gives that to the community at their soup kitchens. And so to me, that's powerful work. That's things that we're doing in a community that's visible. Our clients have a purpose in their community service, and they know that what they're doing is important. It's not just work. The next most effective thing that we do is we engage our clients at community service. Okay, some people just go to community service, and as we know in the past, the picture is the officers there and the people are just working. There's no communication there. They're waiting for the 6 hours to be up, and then they get dismissed. My team, I actively push them to make sure they're asking clients questions, that they're emphasizing the value of the work, just beyond resolving their court matters, letting them know that what we're doing here in this community is life-changing. We're not just here working and sweating, we're here making a difference in this community. This playground that we're cleaning up these needles in these bottle caps so that children can play here. So it's powerful stuff that we're trying to do, and we're also trying to give the client an understanding that this is much more than just you in this situation. This is you healing your community. Another thing we do is we teach by doing. I'm not gonna sit there and just watch you do community service. I'm gonna get involved. I'm gonna help you pick up the trash. I'm gonna help you grab the garbage and go over in that dirty corner and get all the scraps up. That's what we're gonna do. We're gonna get involved. We're not gonna let you feel like you're in this alone, because it's a community effort. The next powerful thing is we find a common ground with our clients. So we touch with them on sports, politics, community, and we try to engage them so that we can build a relationship with them. Because what we learned in our community is that wherever there's respect, respect is given, right? And so if the clients respect you, there's a higher chance of them wanting to be compliant, because they know the next time they come to community service, they're gonna be seeing a familiar face, someone that they connected with at community service, not someone that treated them bad. You see, some of these clients are not afraid to go to jail. A lot of them would just say, well, I'm not coming to community service because this guy didn't treat me right. So we want to establish that relationship with them so that way when they come to community service, it's not just work and punishment, but it's actually you're finding a common ground to heal this individual, We're trying to speak to them about changing their lives. You know, what you could find is that they end up opening up to you when you find a common ground with them. You start talking about the NBA Finals, and now all of a sudden he's telling you that he's struggling with addiction. And now we're trying to find a way, okay, so when you go see the social worker next week at your next appointment, make sure you let her know what these issues are. And I'll contact her today to be ready. Okay, and that's kind of like the powerful things, the little small things that we do that have a great impact on our clients. The next thing is meaningful and visible. And so this is soup kitchens, neighborhood beautification projects, community art projects, community gardens, houses of worship. We're trying to get involved with everything that has to do with community. We don't just want to find these structures that are disconnected from the community. For example, I just recently had a meeting with an individual who runs boxing gyms in the city of Newark. And what we talked about was having a community service project at his sites with some of our younger clients from 18 to 35, and having them do community service at the boxing gym, clean up the gym, and then at the end of the gym session, for an hour, they'll sit down and talk with him about changing their lives. And he was going to use examples like Muhammad Ali or Joe Louis and the struggles that they went through in life and how they conquered them. And so this is powerful because not only are we now addressing the punishment aspect of the court and the mandates that they have to fulfill, but now we're also addressing the social service side, which is the help. And so they're getting a chance to sit down with a member of their community who's going to speak to them about change, who's been on the block, how they've been on the block, and he's able to talk to them about change and guide them into a better life. So this next picture I'm going to show you is two of our community service site supervisors. The one on the right is Trevor Powell. The one on the left is Lamar Mitchell. These two were trained in CIT training, also both master gardeners. And as you can see on the left, which is a picture that I kind of giggle at because I grew up in the hood. This isn't something you see in the hood. Brothers don't grab chickens in the hood. But as you see, we're teaching our people a new way, a new kind of like culture, that it's okay for us to be able to cultivate. It's okay for us to be in gardens. It's okay for us to grab chickens. We get fresh eggs right there. And so you see that the clients get intrigued and they're engaged. And now they're not disconnected because now they're starting to understand and learn something at community service. It's not just work. It's empowerment. It's education. It's encouraging. There's another garden that we're at with Mr. Trevor Powell. And this next one I'm going to show you is very important to me because I had one of the most life-changing situations happen to me here. So this is the Fairmount Garden. So this is a street in Newark that's South Orange Avenue and Fairmount Avenue. And this garden right here, as you can see, was extremely, extremely dirty. Not only was it just dirty, it also had bottle caps of crack cocaine and heroin. It also had needles in it. And our clients cleaned this area. I mean, there were times we went into this garden and there were people using in the back of this garden. And I had to kindly ask them to leave. The powerful thing about this site is that when we were cleaning one day, some of the local drug dealers came to the garden and they approached me. I spoke to them and I said, hey, what's going on? They asked me, what are y'all doing in here? I don't understand why y'all here. We see y'all here every week. So I explained to him what we were trying to do here. This was actually one of the gardens where we started vegetation for the soup kitchen. I explained to them what we were doing, and these, to my surprise, and this is so powerful, these dealers looked at me and they were like, well, that's what y'all doing here? You know what? Next time I see somebody go back there, I'm going to make sure they get out. And whenever you guys aren't here, we're going to clean this property. And that's powerful stuff. That to me is community service that's passionate and it's life-changing. And so the next time we went to these sites, this site was clean. This site was clean, as you can see, because they were taking care of their community because we involved them in that process. We're not just the criminal justice system and you're the community. We're a community together. And we're going to communicate with you these issues that we have and how we're trying to fix them. And you can either be a part of it or you don't. And a lot of times people from these neighborhoods want to be a part of the change because they understand that there is an issue. This is the New Hope Baptist Church. We're giving out food to the community. This is a cleanup of the City Hall and the Newark Municipal Building. And that's my information if anybody ever wants to contact me.
Thank you, Raul. I think that it's amazing that we've seen on a local level the work that both you and James have been able to do. And so, John, I want to turn it over to you because you're kind of in a unique position working with civil alternatives in New York.
Thank you. Yes, we are, and I'll just give you a little bit of a background. Unlike the other two panelists here who have people actually out in the fields working, I don't have the time to do that on a regular basis with the Criminal Justice Reform Act, and I'll give you an overview of that. Criminal Justice Reform Act was an idea that Mayor Bill de Blasio in New York City and the City Council had in April 2015. And they worked on it for about a year. The legislation was passed in 2016, and we became effective 11 months ago in June 2017. So the idea of the Criminal Justice Reform Act is to reduce incarceration within for low-level offenses. And essentially, it gives police officers another tool in their toolbox to have a civil option to issue summonses to our court, which is an administrative law civil court that was established by the City of New York back in the 80s to start taking things out of the municipal court and bring them into a civil setting. So it's a logical and natural extension to have a number of cases that have been in the criminal court for years come over to us. So essentially, we were told you're going to have this option, you're going to be hearing cases that involve people. I think that for us is strange because most of the cases at oath dealt with licensed businesses, restaurants, homeowners. So all of a sudden, coming into the door, we were going to have actual residents of the City of New York coming in, and some of them that may have had mental health problems prior to their coming in. Some of them, young people that had never had a contact with any kind of a government system. But more importantly, we're not a criminal court. It's a civil court. And what the idea was here, that we wanted to reduce collateral consequences. So that means there are no bench warrants if you don't come into to oath for your summons. There's we don't want to have any consequences with regard to a person's employment that criminal court summonses could arise with. Also, for student loans, and when we started this 3 years ago, we weren't really thinking about the immigration impacts that are happening right now across the country in the criminal court system. Thankfully, we have been ignored so far, and hopefully we keep it that way, that people are not coming over to the civil court oath, administrative court, looking to pick up people for possible immigration issues. So, again, the idea is reduce the collateral consequences. New York City, between 2010 and 2015, had the police there had written 2 million summonses for both the quality of life offenses. And in that period of time, and a little bit before that, there had already been 1.5 million bench warrants in the City of New York, which could result in anybody being arrested anywhere in the United States once that bench warrant was activated for what is essentially low-level offenses. So at least now, for most of these offenses, that will not be a result. So what did the Criminal Justice Reform Act do? It took open container, alcohol container cases, littering, public urination, unreasonable noise, and some certain parks violations, and took them out of the criminal realm and moved them into the civil realm. Now, it didn't decriminalize them. Police officers are still allowed to write summonses for those and send them to criminal court, but only in specific situations. So the open container cases are $25 fines. And the public urination cases, these are the two main offenses that do come in, violations that come into us, is $75. So the problem that we had when they turned around as part of the Criminal Justice Reform Act, they also said, not only are you going to have human beings coming in and people with actual problems and not businesses, you're also, we want you to do community service. So the first thing we looked at, it was each other in the office and said, well, how do we figure this out? Well, that was easy. We had CCI nearby, and we were able to reach out to CCI, and we also put a group of stakeholders together about 2 years ago and tried to formulate a option of community service that would fit in with the monetary amount of the fine and also the issues that you would have just trying to get somebody to make it, let's say, to a garden or to a park. You know, by the time somebody has filled out the application for their community service, their $25 is up. So, you know, the fine has been satisfied. So our problem was, well, what do we do? And how do we figure out how to bring people in onto community service? So one of the things that we thought about was modeling it after Red Hook. And Red Hook every day has people come in. Their summons is, you know, they sign in with the court, and then they go for their community service, and then they come back up, stairs, and Judge Calabrese speaks to them, and because they've done their community service, their summons is dismissed, correct? So we couldn't do that because the way the summonses are written, we allow people to come in at any time of the day, even before the date their summons is due in. Usually it's a 45-day swing, but if they want to come in earlier, that's fine, and we're not going to put them off that. And they're not coming in at a certain time. We try to have people come in at 9 o'clock in the morning, but they can come in at 1 or whatever time, as long as there's enough time to do the community service. So we had to devise a system, and the system that we came up with was a e-learning module that we have, and my colleague Schubert is going to, who helped greatly design this. If you got to be at the technology breakout yesterday, we got into this a little bit more. But this is the one part of the e-learning module. And I picked a park because I figured I was sitting on the panel with two folks that dealt with parks. So this is one of the scenarios that we have in the 1 hour e-learning module. So could you you want to flip through it?
So Shuba's just going to click through and demonstrate the e-learning module, which is kind of self-explanatory, but essentially it helps you to not only understand why you got your fine, but it sort of also provides a little bit of an education about what is legal and what isn't legal.
As a point of personal privilege, the pizza rat is something that I asked to be put into you see the pizza rat down there. If anybody remembers the YouTube from about a year ago when this was being put together, we had the pizza rat, so he made his way into this.
I don't know if you can hear me, but as we throw things away, the raccoon and the dirty things are going to start to disappear.
As you see Shuba throwing things away, you'll see that the raccoon disappears, the trash disappears. So you're essentially cleaning. You're restoring the park.
And you're also putting it into the right receptacle bin, whether there's a pizza box in there that when I did this the first time kind of got away from me, and I was told I'm not done and I couldn't figure out where. But This is just one of a number of scenarios. We have another one is a day in the park, which shows what somebody does not picking up their dog's litter and how it just wrecks the day for a little kid playing ball and a couple sitting in the park. And then we have that scenario, how if that person picked up after their dog, how well that would, how much better a day that would have been for everybody involved. And it's a full 1 hour. It's a little, it's paced it that way so that we can fill the mandate of the law of having 1 hour of community service.
So I'm going to thank Shuba for being our tech specialist. So I wanted to spend some time talking with our panelists. You all are thinking outside of the box. And when we think about community service in the court setting or criminal justice setting, as I mentioned earlier, it's often cleanups and, very punitive. And it's oftentimes as a person who works with, many jurisdictions, having that conversation around, thinking about your service being meaningful and visible is often something that's challenging to get across. Why is it so important for community service to be meaningful and visible?
So I think if we're going to be entrenched in neighborhoods, I think it's critical that we as the criminal justice system is not waiting to respond to things. That's typically what we do. Something winds up on our doorstep and then we come back with a response. We have to be much more proactive in figuring out what's happening in neighborhood. I mean, at the very minimum, the reason that you chose the neighborhoods that you are deciding to serve is because you looked at data. Right? That in itself was the first thing you did, but it's no different than thinking about looking at data and areas that have been impacted within that community and trying to figure out the why. And once you start talking more about the why and getting to know your residents, people start to say, well, what can we do? And I think that's really where the mindset has to shift, is that this is not an investment in a one-shot deal. Like, we do a lot of community service. Everybody in this room does a lot of these one-shot deals that are really important and powerful, but it's about an investment in a space. And so if you all thought really hard about your neighborhoods that you serve, you probably could say, if we invested the next year in this spot, what is the real change that we can make? Who should we engage? And what do those conversations look like? So I would just challenge you. It's nothing you don't already know. It's not a how-to, it's a desire to, and it's about being out there every day, over and over and over again. And it's not just creating this like long-term, this is what we hope to accomplish in a year, but every day accomplishing something with the idea at the end of the year, we can celebrate that. So that is the reason why we have decided to kind of focus on community healing as using community service in that way.
And I agree with James, but even on a more smaller scale. I remember being in Judge Pratt's courtroom and a client coming up to the bench. He says his name for the record, and he completed his mandate. So in our courtroom, we clap for every client that completes their mandates. And at the end of that, Judge Pratt asks his client, how was community service? His answer, he says, Judge Pratt, I'm never flicking a cigarette again. And that's powerful, because now we're creating a culture of consciousness towards keeping our community clean. And so now this individual who came up to the bench, who is gang affiliated, he now knows that he ain't gonna flick a cigarette again, and he's not gonna throw his trash on the ground because he was in a community cleaning. And so that's meaningful community service for us, is to create that culture and kind of that mindset amongst our clients that this isn't okay, this behavior isn't okay. And that's what I think community, it being meaningful means to me.
And from our e-learning and the learning module, we look at other scenarios. One of the scenarios, because the main violation that does come in is the open container. So in that, part of the e-learning module will have, it's maybe 5 minutes for that, where there's a grandmother that is saying, I would like to go to the park with my grandchildren, but the kids were out last night drinking beer, and the beer bottles are all over the place in the morning, so how can they play on the slide and the swings? Okay, and then you hear that, and they'll see what the negative impact is within the community, but they're also seeing when they're sitting there for the hour, doing the different scenarios, that there's an impact on gardens in the community, street, the littering, so that the impact is not just isolated to what they're coming in there for, and hopefully they're walking out with a pretty good idea of what they can do for the community and how it helps the community as a whole. And it's not just the one thing that they're there for, it's bigger.
It's really clear to me that, all of your projects weren't done by yourselves. So partnership seems to be really key here. And so how have partnerships been important in kind of rolling these initiatives out? How have you cultivated those relationships with community and other stakeholders?
I think it's just been building relationships with members of our community. It's going around to the churches, going around to the Business Improvement District, which is our Newark Downtown District, which is an organization that cleans up the downtown area of Newark. And once we saw them, we identified, okay, here are people who are cleaning our community. Let's meet with them and see if they need help. And 9 times out of 10, people need extra hands. We have another organization called the Ironbound Community Corporation, and they feed over 500 people every Thursday. And when I found out about that, I reached out to them, and they said, oh my goodness, yes, we need help. We need people to come down here and volunteer because we don't have enough people. And so we've been helping them in that process. And again, it goes right back to it being meaningful for the client and life-changing when he's seeing a family come up and getting food.
And community service is really an answer to a lot of what government thinks that they know how to do, and then there's these gaps. And a great example of that, specifically around public housing, is this coordination of when you put out the garbage. So NYCHA has a time that they put out the garbage, and unfortunately, it's not the same time where sanitation is picking it up. And so it becomes 2 things. One, it becomes a dumping site, because garbage brings more garbage. And then secondly, God forbid it's a windy day. All of a sudden, sanitation will come. They will put the garbage that was on that corner into their trucks, but the rest of the garbage that flew around and was windy goes into the neighborhood. And so we figured out 2 things. One is, how can we work with NYCHA on figuring out a different time to do it, right? A simpler solution, but because of overtime issues and other challenges, we started to fill the gap, where from the time that they put out the garbage to the time that sanitation was going to come, we were going to do 2 opportunities where we came by with our community service crews to check in on the area. So again, it's being very mindful that everybody's intentions were to get the garbage out of the community and do it in the right way, but because of this lapse, they needed another agency, and that's where we used community service to be a problem solver.
And from our end, as I said, the idea of community service for violations was something that didn't exist in criminal court, so we didn't have that as a model. So the first thing we did is we turned to CCI with the help of the Mayor's Office of Criminal Justice to sit down and try to devise a system. And the way this operates is we have 5 hearing centers around the city, and there are CCI members staff members. We essentially contracted CCI for the services of having counselors there. The e-learning module didn't exist for about the first 6 of the 11 months that we've had this project. So they were doing counseling one-on-one with the people that are coming in that are found in violation that opt for community service. So I think that was a major part of our being able to get this off the ground. Like I said, we're only in the 11th month, and it's been the last 5 months that we've had the e-learning module, which is done on a video at each of the locations.
Thank you. I want to ask one final question to the panelists before I open it up for questions. We've talked about the impact of community service on the community, and Raul, I've heard you speak a lot about, engaging individuals. So talk about the connection that clients can have, being connected to services by being, linked to community service, or even just civic education and just general education opportunities that can come from community service. And I'd like to hear from all of you.
So I think there's a few things that we've decided to do with community service. One is use it as a civics course. kind of what is personal responsibility of a citizen of a neighborhood. And before we go out, Raul did a really good job explaining why are we at that spot. Our community service crew supervisors are trained to talk about why we're going to this park, what is the goal, and how do you play a role in that? Again, giving them a sense of agency within the change. That was part one. Part two is this identification where a lot of folks don't realize the skills that they have, and using community service as an opportunity to build up their workforce skills, to think about when you're cleaning, what skills are you using? If you're painting, can you start to think about how you can add these things to your resume? So it is also a really good time to think about what their interests are, how to use this almost as a workforce development, and again, this idea around ongoing conversation while they're out in the neighborhood. The amount of information that we've been able to pick up on who are the people in the neighborhood who aren't doing the right things that we should try to engage before arrest. They're much more likely to do that in those types of settings where we're working together to solve problems, and that doesn't feel like they're being, snitches. It actually just feels like they're being problem solvers with us. And so that information is gathered because the trust that is built, and then we try to engage those residents again to be part of the positive change versus what historically has been the things that's not going right.
One thing that we do in Newark that to me I think has been very impactful is that we started to meet in the morning. So every crew supervisor, every social worker, every intern that's interning with us from 9 to 9:30, we meet. And we talk about the rundown of how the day is going to look. After we talk about the rundown of how the day is going to look, we talk about clients, and we talk about what community service projects are happening that day. And so in that time, it gives us an opportunity to talk about which clients, who's on your caseload, what is it do you think that they need? Sometimes our crew supervisors will tell the social workers, hey, I was on the site with such and such, and he expressed to me that he wanted to get back into school. He actually has his high school diploma. He's ready to go to college. And so that's kind of like a small thing that we do in Newark that helps us to not only stay in communication, but it helps us to create layers of accountability. Because now, that same client that we spoke to on the site, when he gets back to his case manager, she's going to have that same conversation. And guess what? We also have meetings with the judge. So when they get back to court, the judge is also going to know about his progress. So there's always communication, there's always accountability. And so that's how we kind of push our clients towards success.
And I guess on our end, we're in a different situation. So one of the main things that we wanted to do in putting the e-learning module together was make sure that the concepts of procedural justice were present throughout the 1 hour module, which is understanding, respect, voice, and neutrality. And that was very important for us because we weren't going to have that contact with somebody on a regular basis. The CCI people, the coordinators at each of our sites, would speak to them after the hearing officer found them in violation or whatever. But it was also important that the idea of procedural justice was in the e-learning module, plus also very much emphasized with our hearing officers that when they were adjudicating one of these cases, that it wasn't just another buildings case or another sanitation case that where a homeowner or a business was coming in. There was a human being sitting in front of you, and you make sure that you're looking that person in the eye and you're listening to what they have to say. Because a lot of times, look, I got caught, I was drinking in the park, but they just want to be able, the person coming in there just wants to be able to give an explanation, and it's important to be heard. So if you're going to be found in violation and you're going to go down, make sure that that hearing officer is engaged. And so far, to date, we've had, I haven't heard one complaint from anybody that has gone through the adjudicatory process, so that's a good thing.
I'm going to thank our panelists. I'd like to give them a round of applause.